Welcome to AI Unfiltered, the show that cuts through the hype and brings you the authentic side of artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Mark Smith, and in each episode, I sit down one-on-one with AI innovators and industry leaders from around the world. Together, we explore real-world AI applications, share practical insights, and discuss how businesses are implementing responsible, ethical, and trustworthy AI. Let's dive into the conversation and see how AI can transform your business today. Hello and welcome to the AI Unfiltered show. Today I'm joined by Matthias, who's joining me from Monaco, that flash country next to France. We're going to talk about a lot of things today, particularly around the EU AI Act and the impact of governance in AI. Matthias, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I always love starting with food, family, and fun as my opening question, so we can get to know you. Like, what are you into when it comes to food and family and fun?
Food. I just came back from Argentina, so meat all the way, grill, barbecue, all of this kind of stuff. Family, I have 2 kids, who's 2 kids under 4, so a lot of work. And fun, I don't know, before the kids, maybe playing golf from time to time, but currently it's mostly work and family. The fun will come later on, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tell me about the area of AI you're specializing in and why it's important.
So we mostly specialize on AI governance, particularly for Agentic AI. We quickly saw over the past years the importance of the agents and the responsibility that they gain, and the amount of tasks you can delegate to them. If you think about it, before, you had all of those workflows that were pretty complex to automate tasks, and slowly the boxes in your workflow start to reduce to a point where some of the automation is just one single box in your workflow that's having instruction to an agent, tools connected to the agent, and then execution happening inside of it. So you remove kind of the cognitive load of creating all of this, but you're left with this black box that needs to be governed and controlled. And so that's exactly where we realized that there was currently a gap and somewhere to implement a new technology.
Okay, so I suppose Europe, when it comes to AI, is known for 2 major contributions that I think of in the space. Is the EU AI Act, and then there's ISO 24001. What's your experience with both these things?
We started participating actually to the work of normalization, which means you have the acts happening, and along with the acts, Brussels or Europe is creating those norms, which tells you kind of like implementation details around the EU acts. And if you follow those implementation, you have you are deemed that you are compliant until they figure out that they have proof that you are not. Which means it gives you a certain sense of being safe regarding the regulators. But at the same time, there's a lot of delays on that. Currently, we were waiting, I think, this week for a better definition of what's high risk, what's low risk. And it didn't come in. And also looking at a couple of documents, there's some missing information that would be needed, which makes this tight schedule a bit at risk, or definitely at risk, I think. So I think from our perspective, it's we are very curious about that because it's one of the things that we want to provide to all of our customers, a solution around all of those requirements. But at the same time, it's constantly changing now, and there's deadlines that are coming very fast in August 2026, which might get changed, but so far it has not. So we'll see. But there's a lot of unknown currently on this.
It's interesting you said the deadlines might change because that's been said quite a few times about the EU AI Act, and yet they seem to not change them and keep saying, no, these dates are set, right? Even though I feel sometimes the market want them to be a bit more flexible because there isn't, full ratification of things like that severity. But what's the biggest concern that you're getting from customers in regards to their positioning with the EU AI Act?
So the biggest and loudest complaint that we had was actually from the French CEO of Airbus that went not testifying to Congress, but like an equivalent and complaining against Congress. That would be around the fact that when you want to make a piece of software, when you want to implement AI in that, you have the Cloud Act, you have the Data Act, you have the AUA Act, and it kind of becomes a lot of work, particularly for the governance part of the company. And you go to the lawyers and they have some, you go to the lawyer of the company and they start receiving requests around the implementation that you want to do as a scientist in the team. And those binders start to pile up and they don't have time to answer the question and at the same time look at the new regulation and at the same time, like it starts to become a lot, even for a company as big as Airbus. So most of the rest is in a similar situation. Like it's tricky to innovate, particularly in big companies.
So what's your advice to them? And particularly around, I would have thought that a lot of companies, in the way they address governance, might be in a semi-static format, and that they don't, it's kind of like they do an assessment, they move on until something flags that they need to do a reassessment. In the age that we're in, with more and more intelligence systems being potentially to becoming autonomous to some degree, do you see a future where we could ever be in a situation where it's one and done? Or is it going to be a constant evolution of refining, updating your governing principles, particularly around AI, and reassessment of whether, one, your staff are capable, trained on the technology, and potentially your customers and how it affects them? How are you advising organizations from how they handle governance in regards to AI?
Yeah, it's a good point. Like if you look at the acts and also the California bill around AI, there's a strong push for doing pre-deployment monitoring and ensuring that your model respects the law and has the minimum baseline and guardrails that would be needed. And there's also a strong post-monitoring assessment that needs to be done from time to time. We don't have a definition here in terms of exact time that it needs to happen, but there's documentation that needs to be kept to date. Assessments, people need to know about AI, that the human oversight needs to know about AI and be trained to understand the systems. So it's definitely a live system. And if you look at the previous governance push that we've had over the past 20 years, I'd say, even in the data part more than AI, and in balance, it has to do with that in kind of sense. Like we're pushing for compliance and ensuring that the infrastructure behind your compliance is sound. We're not looking at your PDF document, we're looking at your actual processes and other processes. But the difference is that data pipeline is kind of deterministic. You set up the data pipeline, make some monitoring obviously for data quality, but you don't have stochastic components onto that.
Yes.
For agents and LLM, if you run it twice, it gives you different results. But on top of that, there's also all of the components that you have in traditional AI systems that makes it more complex to ensure the quality of the outputs, because it not only depends on the input, but also on the distribution of these inputs and the quality of these inputs. And so that's why we're seeing like a lot of compliance software on the market and traditional GRC that typically handles compliance as a form where you check some of the boxes around your checks and compliance and implementation. But for AI, it will be a bit more complex and needs something actually running and monitoring in real time and ready to block action when something wrong goes on, specifically if you want to implement this into a high-risk system. And we can talk about this, but for me, high risk is where most of the value lies for companies. So it's definitely not something that you can say, oh, it's high risk, I don't want to do that, because you're leaving a lot of money on the table by doing that.
So that's an interesting statement you've said, that most of the opportunity sits in the high risk related. Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, typically, if you look at the implementation of AI in the bank, typically the processes are, we're looking at Copilot for users. We kind of draft some emails to customers. Mainly you save half of the time for an analyst to prepare some of the documentation. But you're not automating workflows. You're not replacing human in 50% of the volume of the work that they get. But if you manage to automate the AML check and review that people are doing inside the bank, and make it so that instead of spending 5 to 10 minutes of a human time, you spend 5 to 10 minutes of the most powerful AI in reviewing all of the detail about the person, then you have a process that's more exhaustive than the current process that you have. And that's also way cheaper. 15 minutes, 20 minutes of a human might cost you between $20 and $100, depending on where you are based.
Yes.
But for a machine learning model, it's like 5 cents. Even for the base model on OpenAI, processing one document or one step will cost you between 5 to 10 cents if you use the latest thinking model, all of the most powerful parts. Because it's not that many tokens, but the value added is huge. We're talking about a 100 to 1 ratio of cost.
Yeah. So in this constant living governance system, I would expect that it's quite likely that agents are then going to be needed to maintain that system, because humans won't be able to keep up with the evolution. I mean, just today, I think Gemini released a new model after only a few weeks ago releasing another. And let's say you're an organization that uses models from Google, you're going to need to, of course, refactor what happened if model releases come down to weekly or even more frequently? They almost are now. What would, the overhead to an organization from that, if they didn't go to an agentic way of handling it, would be insurmountable, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would, definitely. And there's a strong risk of also being out innovative if you don't do that. And the interesting part, and that has been my experience in building those AI automation software over the past years, is that you test out some hypotheses and processes and try to automate it with one model. Then it doesn't exactly work, or you have to do like prompt engineering to make it work. And there's some issues like historically AI was very bad at reading checkboxes and getting, if you had checkbox in a file, then it was tricky to exactly extract this information. So you had some vendors that built on top of that were doing that. And you had to combine those vendors with multiple calls to AI. And maybe you use 2 AI systems, Gemini and OpenAI to get the results. But now with the latest model, you don't need to do that. The infrastructure is way simpler. And so you can think about that to most of your implementation. If what you're doing with the current generation of model doesn't work, it's very probable that the next generation will be able to be used this power for a fraction of the cost that you're looking at. So it's not only on the existing process that you need to be on top of all of the release, but also like your previous failed experiments. You need to go back to them every time there's a new model and run them again to see if that works.
Yeah. When companies come to you and they're like, hey, I've got concerned at the level of compliance we have regarding the EU AI Act, or is there a risk that it's going to slow us down from an innovation perspective? How do you go about justifying the EU AI Act to customers and why it's important? Like, let's say we put the fines to one side for breach. How do you go about explaining the purpose and how it covers customer expectations? Probably the person out in the market that doesn't even understand that a lot of the systems they're already working with have got a lot of AI in them and have had done for many years, even pre-generative AI. But it's now on their radar. People are concerned about how their data is going to be used by the companies they work with. I was speaking at a conference in Vegas recently, and one of my colleagues said if clients knew the way you treated their data, they probably wouldn't be your clients. And so with all that, backstory, how do you land the EU AI Act and the importance of it to business?
Rolling out Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses isn't enough. You need an adoption plan to get people using it well. In our new book, published by Microsoft, we offer a practical guide to successful Copilot adoption. Many leaders believe in the why of Copilot and AI, but they need guidance on how, from practical frameworks to enabling champions and measuring impact. Get your copy of Microsoft 365 Copilot Adoption now from Amazon or find a link in the show notes.
It's actually very timely with all of the debate over the weekend through Anthropic and OpenAI and the Ministry of War of the US.
Yes.
So, and you see the big backlash regarding those. I think Anthropic went on to be number one on the Play Store.
The App Store?
Yeah, the App Store. You had, who was that, Lady Gaga, who tweeted about getting the max account for Anthropic. Not Lady Gaga, I don't remember.
I don't know who, but they doubled their subscriber base in the last couple of weeks, haven't they? And then I think OpenAI has dropped some of the stats is like 750,000 subscribers have closed their accounts.
It's huge. It's companies that are built and working at the edge of AI, which means being at the edge of your capital usage and cash flow management, because you want to be the best. You need to be tight on your cash flow management. And then you have this sudden drop. It's not related here to the question, but that's seriously concerning for that. And there's a huge risk of public backslash that could even be existential if you extrapolate a bit the consideration and make it a bit more. I could imagine OpenAI going bankrupt because of a sudden very big drop and the cash flow issue. But yeah, so within this backslash and the public knowledge and understanding and curiousness about how they use how AI is being used, there's the AUX. I don't remember if there's things around the military usage of AI inside of the Act, because I'm mostly focused on business. But I rather ask, and you have some probability usage that are kind of normal, like it's public surveillance and scoring of users, of persons, like you have in China, or in China, for example. That's prohibited. But apart from that, it's also like ensuring that you don't deceive people. You don't say that it's a human or it's AI.
Yes.
You don't ship black box systems into decisions that could have an impact in your life without the proper control. I wouldn't want to have like my credit score being handled by AI, a system that no one understands and no one has oversight on. So it's pretty reasonable asks. And it's a lot of burden on top of companies. That's true. But it's also their job. And you need to be able to respect the law and proceed in a certain way that's responsible. You're getting a lot of efficiency through your business by using AI. So you need to be respecting of the users, because we're not very far from those science fiction examples that you think about. If I put OpenAI in your phone 10 years ago, that would definitely be science fiction and truly something of the future. So we're kind of living in there, but at the same time, that justifies all of the protection and requirements.
Yeah. How prepared or how unprepared do you feel businesses are in regards to the EU AI Act? Do you think that there's a big disparity between compliance and non-compliance? Do you think that, people went through the whole process with GDPR? I was just talking to somebody earlier today in America that was processing EU citizen data in the US and weren't doing anything about from a GDPR perspective, and go, well, how does it apply to us? We're not in the US. Well, with that lack of understanding that the EU AI Act reaches, just like GDPR does, way beyond Europe in its implication, right? So when you think about compliance, it might be that, do you think Europe is well on the way to be covered, but then a lot of, companies doing business with European businesses and European citizens are not addressing this as seriously as they should be?
Yeah, funnily enough, we received a couple of rebounds from Japanese companies because of this reason. They might have factory inside Europe. And so if they implement AI or use the same for management of their employees, they will have to respect the AI Act, even if they are a Japanese company. But I think there's a lot of freak out, I'd say. The people have been concerned about that. But if you look at the start of GDPR, I think the estimation by the FTC, I think it was, in the US, was that the cost of GDPR compliance for a small company, or small to medium business, will be around $1 million or north of $1 million. But if you look into it 10 years later, it's actually roughly between $10,000 to $100,000 in actual cost that you need to do. And it's less expensive than basic software compliance to be GDPR compliant now.
Yeah.
So we will see a lot of overestimation, I think, of the actual costs that will be applied. But there's some valid constant, like the delay of those normalization and the delay of the guidance on implementation of the acts definitely impacts businesses. And you're stuck in having like this northern guideline that you need to follow without explicit implementation details on what you need to actually do.
Tell me a bit about what your company does then with clients in regards to all this.
So it's mostly runtime governance for AI. So it's a control plane for your agents that you deploy. And we will control, we sit between the person calling your AI and your AI system. And we will control everything that your AI does. We control that the input is correct based on your governance. We control that the output of the model is correct. That within the model of the tool usage are also within your requirements. And the way you build up this requirement is a mix between normal LLM guardrails that you can implement, as well as policy as code type of guardrails for deterministic check. So our objective is to be the platform that you can use to implement those high-risk systems, and specifically that works for banks, for all of the regulated industry, for pharma. So in banks, for example, we're currently working on the AML section of the anti-money laundering, where you usually have alerts that are created automatically for any anti-money laundering. And those alerts has traditionally 95% false positive rates. So you have a human always going through them and validating those. And so we're pushing regulators across Europe to ask, like, if we put an agent that works better than a human, would you be able to validate this implementation of automatically closing some of the alerts? And if not, what is the reason? And if we add all of the features that Kala brings, would you allow it? So it's kind of a discussion that we currently have with the regulators, which is a tricky because they don't explicitly validate a third-party vendor. They will not promote our company to banks. But we try to push those. And the same goes for pharma companies, where they had the pharmacovigilance process. I don't know if you're familiar, but usually when you put a drug on the market, you'll have feedback from medical doctors everywhere telling you that, I gave this to my patients and then has some adverse effects. And then as a pharma company, I'm responsible of collecting all of those reports and then updating my side effects on the notice of the remedy of the drug.
Yes.
Or even removing it from the market. So it's all very high-risk systems, very manually intense systems, and humans are not historically perfect at those tasks as well. So can we go even further than human goes through AI, just because we can spend the equivalent of hours of human reasoning for a fraction of the cost? And bring those implementation in the most critical functions of the society. And It's interesting because it both gives a benefit for the banks, gives a benefit for the society as well, in improving those critical processes. And it pushed the regulators. The regulators actually pushing for AI implementation for banks, for example, because they want the bank to have operational support and avoid just the bank saying, I don't have the workforce to do the implementation that you're asking. Now the regulator can say, we have AI, figure it out and implement it.
Yeah. My last question as we wrap up, what's been the outcome? Have you got any success stories with the companies that you've worked through without naming names? But, what have been some of your kind of, case studies, reference points that you've been able to deliver on thus far?
Well, currently, early in the process, we finished the platform in November and starting looking for customers actually in December of last year. So we're talking with a lot of prospects. We are both the founder and coming from a bank and insurance background, but we were very surprised by the amount of inbound that we had from pharmaceutical companies across Europe. So we had to figure out a lot of those processes. So far, we don't have a customer success story, but what we're doing is trying to bring the regulators together and figure out those actual use case and implementation that can be done.
Yeah.
And we see different degree of maturity in the market on AI usage, but there's a lot of companies, even those who never jumped onto the machine learning wagon, that are looking in 2025, 2026 at implementing agents, just because of the noise, just because of the progress, the fact that it's everywhere. And the fact that it's kind of magical. Like, if you put an executive who never implemented AI in their companies and make them use OpenAI for a bit, or ChatGPT, they'll quickly realize that part of the performance they could gain is pretty significant. And it can be on development of software, it can be on automation of tasks. So it's a pretty interesting time to be working on AI.
Matthias, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to AI Unfiltered with me, Mark Smith. If you enjoyed this episode and want to share a little kindness, please leave a review. To learn more or connect with today's guest, check out the show notes. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time, where we'll continue to uncover AI's true potential, one conversation at a time.